younger, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. A lot of my aspirations were completely different. And when I was in I think it's year 10, so I think I was 15, is when there was a school trip to Media City in Manchester. And I went on that. And then from then, I was kind of hooked on television and on producing film. And I applied to go to York. I got into York and I spent 3 years there studying film and television production. And yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. And what does school look like? Like,
Um,
do you get assignments and then where do
yeah,
you start?
so university was very different because of COVID. So that really changed up the routine of everything. So the whole of my first year was actually online. So that wasn't ideal. I spent a lot of time at home and not any time at all in the actual buildings. And then second year, we were lucky that it was in person, but it was a lot of work and still a lot of that online as well, which again was quite difficult. And then my third year, which my final year, was really good. It was very, very difficult again, because I think a lot of the impact from not having a first year really fell onto us in third year. We kind of realized that we hadn't had any of the training really that we needed to complete what we needed to do. But I did enjoy myself and took some really interesting modules, so it was good in the end. So in my final year, I specialised in studio production, so that's like in live television basically, which is fantastic. And we produced a satirical 15-minute program called Everything's Fine, basically just talking about everything going on in the world. So that was really good. And that went out like live to YouTube, and that was all very interesting to do for the first time. And then I did a documentary module, which is where my dyslexia documentary came about. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So tell me a little bit about that. How
Yeah,
did you
so
tell the story? And it's not available yet, or it will be?
no, so basically it's not something that I have actually produced yet. So we had to, for my dissertation, so for my final project at university, we had to make, well, you have a dissertation. Some people chose to write a script. Some people chose to do an experimental piece of artwork, like in the film. And I chose to do a documentary, which involved planning a full, mine was 60-minute documentary, doing all of the budgeting, all of the paperwork for that, as well as writing, I think it was about 6,000 words on the documentary and what would be in it if you were making it. And then obviously making the 15-minute short version, kind of like a teaser of what your documentary would be. And that's when I interviewed Brock. So
Oh,
yeah.
great. And so is there like because I know that once it's available, I'm sure that we can send people to your site to watch it and everything like that. So how did you go about doing things like that? And were there discoveries along the way when you look
Yeah.
back at yourself?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I at first struggled to pick what I wanted to do a documentary on. I just kind of got a massive whiteboard and wrote down everything that was about me, because one of the biggest things they told us is it has to be something that you have your perspective on, and that is often something that you've either struggled with or something that you know a lot about. So there was one point where I was in between doing a documentary on dogs and then dyslexia. So I chose dyslexia. And I didn't really, again, know what my angle was going to be. And the more research that I did about the dyslexic mind is kind of where I then decided that I wanted to focus on mental health and dyslexia as my kind of more pinpoint route. But
Yeah. So I mean, looking at yourself as a child and looking at yourself now, what's changed?
everything, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to education specifically, there was a long time where it was up in the air whether I would get into university and what I would do. I was very lucky in that my mum was able to put me into private education, which really meant that I got more support for my dyslexia. And I then went to a college where I was able to do courses that weren't the standard science and maths. I was able to do media studies, film studies, and art A level. So I was able to really like express that side of me before then going to university. But yeah, when I was younger, I didn't get diagnosed dyslexia until I think I was 7, so quite early, but it still felt quite late for me. And then from then things have kind of changed. But
You know, what struck me when I was going back and listening to your interview, and we'll have some excerpts of that also that we'll give out to the general community. But you know, when you described missing your music electives because you
Mhm.
had these pullouts and things like that. And
Yeah.
um, I mean, what do you remember about the time?
I hated my dyslexia lessons. It was the most infuriating time. The only good part was that my best friend at the time, she was also dyslexic. So it kind of, for me, was a way of, okay, I don't have to go to lessons, like I should go hang out with my friend. But when I was actually in there, it was like this almost weird mocking of what I couldn't do, in the way she was really trying to help. And I'm very thankful for my teacher who was trying to help. But we had this very big book that the only thing I remember from it was either reciting numbers and I had to remember them and then recite them back to her, which I didn't understand at all. Or there were words that weren't actually words. It was just like gobbledygook. It was just like loads of words put together, and I had to read them and tell, like, enunciate it correctly and pronounce it. And I was like, but they're not actual words. So I never understood it. And there's no real motivation for me to do it because it didn't actually really help, or I didn't feel like it was helping at all, my English. And I mean, even up until doing the research now, I didn't really realize that my struggles in maths and mathematics was actually to do with my dyslexia at all. And I never ever got told when I was taken out of 2 music lessons every week for what must have been a year. In that, I never got told, oh yeah, you know that you struggle with maths, that could be related to your dyslexia. None of that ever got explained to me, and I wasn't really given any coping mechanisms or ways I could actually read real words or anything like that. It was a lot of, I felt like they were trying to trick my brain into things I didn't quite understand yet. But it might have helped, but I couldn't see it at the time, at least. So
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, I understand the rationale of teaching because they're, you know, if you learn these kind of little subparts for words,
mm,
then it can help with these other words. You know, otherwise you memorize them. But what's funny to me is there are a lot of, like, even in the you know, the state of the art, it's, you know, the structured literacy, you know, Orton Gillingham, all these kind of things, multisensory. There's not an essential component where they say, tell the students what you're doing. Can we
yeah.
get a picture? Like, I understand why the little picture and the details are so important,
Mm,
but if you also don't help students see the bigger picture of what they're doing, or because some people think, well, let's see, let's do more intensive work on here, so maybe you pay off early on, than you
mm,
want. But the downside is if you completely disconnect students from their passion areas where, see, I would think music that you would use in your video production, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I mean, if you actually disconnect them from all their strengths and learning about the world and creating things, then that's a mistake too. And if there's no time in in a student's day for that, it can be counterproductive to a young person's education. And I you know, I can see some of these great programs, but they don't insist on this bigger picture as part of
yeah,
the teaching, and it's a miss.
yeah.
So I mean, I can see, I mean, I think that's a little refreshing because now in the United States there's a big movement toward identification, or somewhat identification. There's some flaws there as well,
Mm,
but you know, like for instance, there's a program which a lot of students hate, which is not, to be fair, it is not a structured literacy program. People are slipping it in as this will satisfy our dyslexia requirement.
yeah,
And we don't
yeah,
actually have to tell people that the dyslexia, we could say it's something like dyslexia or something like that. So no one ever finds out, and no one finds out what the meaning of dyslexia is, the bigger picture, the positives that come with it,
mm,
nothing. Instead, you get an adaptive program where it's the idea, if you're weak in this, you'll just do more of it.
yeah, yeah,
But it's such a fallacy because because especially if you don't tell people, and explicit instruction is really the key for the best programs. So
yeah,
this other program, which is assigned to thousands, hundreds of thousands of students, simply makes you repeat the program. And it's a mind-numbing thing. I mean, the thing is about dyslexic students, this bigger picture context, you know, conceptual learning is key. And if it's not a key part of your education, the boat's been missed,
Yeah.
and then it, on the consequence of the effects on what students think education thinks about them, right? So that's definitely the negative. But you managed to get through that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You had a supportive family. You got to a school where unfortunately COVID was hitting, and so that was down. But those modules sound terrific. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's like at the time in college, you're like, what? I don't know how to do this. And I'm being
Yeah.
assigned this. I think that's kind of the crazy thing. It's trial by fire. You just dropped in there and try to make it. But you must have decided. I mean, I think your questions were wonderful. Your responses are wonderful too. You might very well find yourself in front of the camera as well as in back of the camera,
Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, yeah, you have a lot of poise. And so have you found that storytelling or finding the story, telling a story with what people tell you, all this kind of nonlinear process is a good fit for you and how you think?
I mean, I guess so. It's never something that I've really thought about. Like, it's not something that I have like mastered or practiced or even considered. I've always enjoyed stories, but I hated reading, and they always kind of like went against each other. And I enjoyed telling stories, but I hated writing. And it always felt like you couldn't do both of those things. I couldn't have both. So it was never something that I think if I loved reading, I would have gone really, really far in it, specifically telling stories and writing stories or making stories. So I think I was lucky that I discovered like the film and TV industry where you can do that without mass amounts of writing or reading. But it was never a skill or like something that I thought I would ever use. And I think I'm hopeful that in the future it's something that I can use. At the moment, I'm very much starting at the very bottom of the like industry ladder. But I'm hoping that in the future, when I make more of a name for myself, I can use my own ideas and use my own stories and kind of talk with people about my own concepts. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure because I know that the time you spent, and I'll give you, for instance, like I do notice because we watched when I was doing my own medical training, we watched a lot of medical students or other medical personnel and their interviewing skills, and some people are like, I want to get the information. I'm like a can opener. I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to like open up the can and all this stuff will come out. But you come on too strong and then people sort of back out and then they don't say anything. And yet they're also, you can err on the other side. You're so open-ended. You have no ideas, that basically a person could go wildly off track. But
Yeah.
I would say that in your interview with Brock too, I think you brought up some, very important issues that
Yeah.
just came naturally into conversation. And I don't think anyone has ever tapped quite that way. And he's been interviewed, many, many
Yeah.
times. So, I mean,
Yeah.
so there you go. I mean, I think that that aspect of being able to, and you had mentioned also that people skills are something that you love working with people, and that aspect of it is just perfect for interviewing, having sensitivity to see where they're going, also seeing some questions that other people might be interested in. All those things are just wonderful things to bring with your work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. Now you got this internship. You want to
Yeah.
tell us about that, or
Kind
what
of.
what kind of position is it?
It's not really an internship. It's kind of more I was lucky enough to have some or get some 3 days work experience on a Netflix production. And
How did
then
that happen? How did
that
that happen?
it's a long story that I can condense into a shorter story where it was all a lot of like universe and fate and random people who knew each other without knowing they knew each other and things like that. But basically I was told by someone who I don't really know but knew that basically there was filming occurring in the town next to mine, and I just showed up and I was like, hi, can I look around? Like I'm about to graduate. At this point, I should have been in the middle of doing my dissertation, and I wasn't. But it worked out better. And I just asked, and I was able to like look around. And then I was cheeky. I was like, "Can I come back? Like, I don't want to be paid, but can I just be here?" And then I got 3 days from that, which was fantastic. I spent 2 days with the cameras, and then 1 day with the assistant directors. And then after that, I was asked back about a month later to do 3 days paid work at the end of July. which was fantastic. And that was brilliant. And then from that, they wrapped on my last day as well. So that production was finished and over. And then I was recommended by two of the girls on that. And I had one single day's work on a ITV production. And then I've got 6 days work starting this Sunday on a new BBC production. So yeah.
So the first time you were there, were you just observer? Were you a gopher? What did you actually do? And what could you watch?
Well, when I was with the work experience, when I was with camera, it was a lot of learning and a lot of just kind of being there to help everyone, doing either the little jobs, or sometimes they gave me really big jobs to like see what I would do with it and how I'd handle it. And then the last few days that I've actually been paid to work, I've been a floor runner, which is the lowest level in the assistant directing department, where you can have any task. Like your tasks can really range completely across what you're doing. It can go from looking after cast members, making sure they're okay, to looking after crowds of people and extras, or making sure everyone's in the right place at the right time. It's a really, really varied job, which I really enjoy, like how much there is that you can be doing. For example, the job that I start on Sunday, I have no idea what it's going to be like. I have no idea what they're going to be really filming, who's going to be there, where I'm going to be. Like I don't even know what time I start. So it's a lot of like uncertainty, but I do quite enjoy the fun and they're like keeping the excitement, and it's really good. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it. It's fantastic. So
yeah, and I guess the thing that I didn't realize too is when I think about film and I think about cutting and editing and all that kind of stuff, but directing is a lot of people work.
yeah.
So what a huge management. You've got people that you barely know, people that you've known for years, and then people who just happen to be looky-loos are on the side, and you've got this, you've got the sound and you've got the people, but that kind of dynamic thing, and also the fact that you've got all these moving parts, it's not for everyone, right? You have to, I would think that you want to be situationally aware, at where things are, and also be able to handle things on the spot, that you haven't been trained to do, that you've got good people skills, that you can manage things like that. At the same time, a lot of dyslexics are really good with techie stuff, like cameras, and also being able to, we interviewed a guy who's actually now a good friend of ours, Larry Banks, cinematographer, but he was talking about his spatial skills too, being able, he does special effects scenes, being able to know what would that look like when I'm standing on the roof, and what just being able to visualize where all the people are in three-dimensional space. And also, if your camera's falling with a person through something, what that's going to look like on the way down. I mean, I just think that that's such a wonderful combination of talent sets that's really very attuned and not at all emphasized in school years, right? You wouldn't even necessarily, sometimes if you watched a movie, you can realize, what, I can imagine that shot or something like that. You know what I mean? But that's really cool. That's even beyond the storytelling, right?
Yeah. So this is kind of the place where, I mean, most people do start here in the industry, and I've been very, very lucky to have the opportunities I have had from that work experience. A lot of people who have just graduated are really struggling to find work at the moment. But it's kind of, you work your way up. So I'll probably be a runner for like 1 to 2 years, and then you work your way up to third assistant director, then second assistant director, and then first assistant director, and you kind of keep building and building until potentially one day you're able to be the director and you're the person who is able to be in charge, which would be really cool. But it's a very slow process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that first job, taken as a volunteer, showing up, but your credentials probably helped, right?
They didn't see any. But
you said I'm a film and TV.
Yeah. I said that, I said, hi, like I'm graduating soon, and I've never been on a film and TV set, but it's my dream to work on one. Would I be able just to come back for some work experience, just to see what it's like and experience it like in real life? And that's what they really liked, is that it was kind of keen to be there, and it was 12-hour days in the rain and things like that, but it was fantastic. Yeah.
And great for you. And then you got a paid job, which is kind of amazing. Yeah. And then now that's a little thing on your resume, and then you can exactly. Yeah. Fabulous. Well, do you have any advice for parents and young people?
Um, I think that dyslexia is hard, and I think that it's okay to admit that it's hard, and also like admit that sometimes it does really suck and it is really hard. And I had lots of times, even making my dyslexia documentary, where I was so close to just like, I can't do this. I should just not do uni, not graduate, just be finished now, because it is really difficult. But I think that when you find your niche, and that can only really come from taking random opportunities with things that you might come home and go, why did I just waste a day doing that? But it's not really a waste, because it really helps you find your thing. Because when you find your thing, and for me it's like assistant directing and being in that film and television industry, once you find it, it is like a piece of gold, and it is the most incredible feeling, because you don't come home and feel like inadequate. Or I used to and still do get extremely frustrated by my dyslexia, even though I, have come to terms with it and I've said hello to it, and I've spoken to my dyslexia in not a weird way, but it still can be really tough. But when you find your thing and you find what you are passionate about, even when you have days that are really difficult, your dyslexia is actually the thing that helps you. And you look back and go, God, if I wasn't dyslexic, that would have been really, really hard. Or, oh, if I actually wasn't, if I couldn't see this, or if I didn't have the people skills that my dyslexia forced me to get to make different connections with people, I would not have been able to do this, or I would have been like that person who was really struggling. And I think that's kind of a really nice moment that people should strive towards. And it's not linear. And I'm sure that in 4 months' time, I'll be again really frustrated or really angry. But it's a nice slow upwards like climb to coming to terms with your dyslexia. And I think from a parent's perspective, like allowing as much as you can your child to experiment with, even if it's different instruments or different clubs and different sports, and not getting frustrated that they haven't found something they've stuck with. Because I did so many instruments, it's ridiculous. And my mum put up with me doing different dance classes and hating dance and doing this and hating that. And I think all children go through it. But in my experience, being dyslexic and being able to do that, and being able to test what I could do and push my dyslexia outside of school specifically, was really, really beneficial for me. And it really allowed me to harness my dyslexic strengths in a way that at the time I didn't realize is what it was doing. And I didn't connect that until I'm here now, and I'm done a documentary about it, or have written a documentary about it, and I'm looking back and going, oh, actually, all of those times where I was meant to play the guitar and now I hated the guitar, and then I wanted to play the flute, and then all of these things, it really did help me build my resilience within myself when I realized I wasn't very good at something, but also my ability to say to other people what I needed and what I felt like I needed, even if it was as simple as I don't want to do guitar anymore and things like that. But yeah, I feel like I rambled a bit.
And you never know when it starts coming back again, I mean, some of these kinds of things, you have an appreciation for music, and you also know the work that goes into making it too. And and film and sound and music is all important for creating a mood. So it comes back in interesting ways, So, I just wouldn't be surprised, they did one of those things where they visit you every 10 years. There's
Yeah.
going to be some new things like that. Oh, I thought I gave that up. Oh, it turns out I can actually do it in this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These little things on the side that weren't necessarily what you thought. I mean, certainly happened to me. What I thought was the point of what I was doing at the time,
Yeah.
it comes back in interesting ways, and it makes you just, and I think that key, there's this multi-talented aspect for a lot of dyslexic people,
Yeah.
and there are some who are really best as one narrow thing that they're really going to get better and better at. It's not saying that that's not a worthy thing too, but there's a lot of different ways to be successful and to be happy,
Yeah.
and I just think it's so exciting what you're up to and what you've done.
Yeah.
And we certainly thank you, because I think, like I said, I think that aspect that you shared with Brock's interview was really important. And even today, I love what you shared today, so really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity even just to talk to like you and Brock has been one just absolutely fantastic. I had so many moments, like it's kind of crazy how many moments of realization in one interview I had about my dyslexia with Brock, like being like, oh, there's no way that's what's been causing me problems for the last like 12 years. There's absolutely no way you just told me that right now. So it's been a very much a two-way street where I've learned so much, one from your research and things like that, but just genuinely like talking and communicating with you both about it all, even like practicing like sending emails and making sure everything's sent and correct, things like that. It sounds so like small, but it's been really, really beneficial for me, so thank you for that as well.
Yeah, well, we're excited for you, and
Yeah,
let's stay in touch.
yes, definitely.
Good luck.
Definitely, thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.